It's time for 515 Fantasy Football.
I know football. Are you ready for some football?
Domination on Sundays begins with listening to these guys on Thursdays.
You ready for this?
Over 40 years of fantasy football experience between them.
Yeah!
One is a proud veteran of the United States Marine Corps, husband and father, entering his 18th year of fantasy competition. Brian Eikenberry. The other, also a proud husband and father, is one of the winningest fantasy minds in the state. Celebrating 24 years of excellence. Andy Hall.
Let's get the game on!
It's showtime. The 515 Fantasy Football Show with your hosts, Andy Hall and Brian Eikenberry.
4 weeks down and one step closer to the ultimate goal of fantasy championship. Even at this point, if you find yourself 2-2 or 1-3, and I'll even go so far as to assert, even if you are currently winless, which I'm certain none of our regular listeners will be, but even if you have had the worst of luck through 4 games, there is still time to turn this thing around. Andy Hall alongside Brian Eikenberry. Nobody better than us to get you back on the winning track. Ain't that right, Brian?
That's right. You know, if you, what I've really been excited about is looking over our bargain bin picks, whether they've been stashes or they've been just really solid ads. We've made some pretty significant calls that have netted a lot of points for people out on that bargain bin.
I got a ton of things to cover over our 2-hour show, including those bargain bin picks, including grades on all the fantasy relevant players, break down each of this week's matchups, heavy on the bye week here in week 5. In just a little bit, a very special guest joining the show to talk sneaky good pickups and pay a debt owed to us. For those of you that are in need of a dart throw, I mentioned the bargain bin, pop quiz answering 3 of Fantasy's toughest questions, and the always unpredictable but usually entertaining Flea Flicker will wrap things up. We invite you to be a part of our online community on Facebook, 515 Fantasy Football, on Twitter at 515 Fantasy, and online at espndesmoines.com. We're all about interacting with you. Our guarantee is we will never ignore you. You invest in us, we give it right back, and that's how it works, Mr. Brian.
Absolutely. Let's get it on.
Let's begin, as we always do, with some headlines of fantasy note, and we begin with something that happened not long after last week's show. Unfortunately, we didn't get to it in our show, but Browns wide receiver Josh Gordon has decided to enter rehab. The team plans to move on without him, and even if they wanted to hang on, as many of us did, he remains banned indefinitely from the NFL. So I guess we'll just move on from Josh Gordon in general. Cowboys wide receiver Dez Bryant has what one source described as a bone bruise on his knee. Nothing serious, but he could be in the lineup this week. I'm guessing he won't be. He needs to heal that thing before he gets back into action again. Just my take on that. Brian, anything different?
Nope, I 100% for an oddity agree with you on this one.
Gotta love that. The Ravens have decided to part ways with running back Justin Forsett. Terrence West remains the team's starter, but rookie Kenneth Dixon will be ready for action this Sunday. We'll talk more about that breakdown a little bit later. Jets running back Matt Forte dealing with injuries to his knee and to his ribs, limited at practice this week. Raiders running back Latavius Murray is, quote, pretty banged up after last weekend's game. He's questionable to play. In fact, you might want to make plans to start somebody in his place because he might not go. Patriots running back LeGarrette Blount dealing with a sore hip. This has been something he's been dealing with for a very long time. He was limited at practice on Wednesday, but I don't see any reason why he shouldn't play this weekend. Miami running back Arian Foster back at practice this week, but he may sit at least one more week. And here's an interesting story straight out of Miami. Coach Adam Gase has pretty much admitted that this four-headed committee he was utilizing was a big mistake, and he won't do that anymore.
Yeah, that's pretty funny, but that's also really good news as soon as Arian Foster gets healed up and ready to make an impact.
But in the meantime, who do you think it'll be? Will it be Jay Ajayi? Will it be Damian Williams, who surprised a lot of folks? I might be the only fantasy person in the entire country that even mentioned Damian Williams by name prior to this whole committee thing happening in Miami.
Yeah, it's one of those things where rule of thumb, if you don't know what's going to happen, just stay away. Just stay away from it until Foster's healthy. Right now, I'm out of it. I'm out of the argument.
Miami backfield's kind of been a dumpster fire anyway. Cardinals backup running back Chris Johnson placed on IR with a groin injury. He's out at least 8 weeks. A lot more pressure put on David Johnson now. His immediate backup, of course, is Andre Ellington. Quarterback Carson Palmer is in the league's concussion protocol, has been declared out for tonight's game versus San Francisco. That means we'll get to see Drew Stanton, and I am going to cover that matchup a little bit later on. Speaking of the Niners, linebacker Navarro Bowman. We don't talk defensive players an awful lot here, but this is a significant one. He's out for the year with a torn Achilles. That run defense wasn't great to begin with, but losing a guy like Bowman is a huge loss for the Niners, Brian.
Yeah, pretty much anybody who's playing the Niners defense now, you can lock and load on.
Gotta love David Johnson tonight, hopefully. Speaking of torn Achilles, Falcons linebacker Sean Witherspoon also out for the season. How about some more defensive players, Brian? 1 week after placing defensive end J.J. Watt on injured reserve, Texans have done the same with defensive end Devon Still. So they lost both their defensive ends within 1 week of each other.
Well, you have to think that it is going to hurt their run defense. So just because it is fantasy football, you also need to pay attention to the defensive side because these injuries will start to affect the defenses and it won't show up on their stat line for a while because everything's averaged out.
You know they must be pretty significant if we're mentioning them here in the headlines of Fantasy Note. But, hey, while we're talking impact defensive players, Chargers corner Jason Verrett, a partially torn ACL. He's out for the rest of the season. That San Diego defensive backfield becomes very shaky, having lost one of the best cover corners in the entire game.
Yeah, and just so happens this week they are going against a top 10 passing offense. So something to listen for as we get later on in the show.
Panthers head coach Ron Rivera has, quote, no idea whether Cam Newton will be ready for action this weekend following a concussion he suffered on Sunday. If it isn't Cam, it's Derek Anderson. We haven't seen Derek Anderson in extended play for quite some time, but he's a guy that's at least capable of going in and giving you some serviceable fantasy numbers. So we'll keep a close eye on that situation. Boy, a lot of bumps and bruises in the NFL this week. Bears head coach John Fox suggested Brian Hoyer could keep the team's starting job regardless of Jay Cutler's health. So what that tells me is they're not going to be in any hurry to see that hand get healed.
Yeah, it's just man, you just mentioned it. You don't know what's happening anymore, and just injury after injury, it just makes it all that more important to pay attention to that last hour and a half before a game goes.
Wide receiver Kevin White placed on IR with a high ankle sprain. He's eligible for return come week 8. Broncos head coach Gary Kubiak insists Trevor Siemian will start Sunday despite an injury to his non-throwing shoulder. I'm going to keep maybe kind of a 80-20 that it's going to be Siemian, but Paxton Lynch didn't look any better or worse than Siemian when he came into the game for him last week. So, you know, if they wanted to keep Siemian out another week, I think the Broncos might be able to survive. But Paxton Lynch getting a little bit of time last week was kind of fun to watch. Bucs head coach Dirk Cutter suggested Charles Sims' role may be reduced this week. Makes me wonder if Tampa's going a little more pass-heavy in this game. We shall see. Jets wide receiver Eric Decker unlikely to play this week with that rotator cuff injury. Wondering about the severity of this. There have been rumors floating around that this could land him on injured reserve. We have not as of yet seen that. There has been talk that he could play through it maybe. Head coach Todd Bowles has been very quiet about Decker's potential timeline for return, and that scares me as a fantasy owner.
Yeah, absolutely. It is heartbreaking. You listen to the coach says one thing, the player says another, and sources say another. You have to err on the side of caution here, and you need to start loading up your roster with backups quickly.
The Lions benched Golden Tate for a time last Sunday. Is his job in jeopardy, Brian?
Well, I don't think his job is in jeopardy. Everyone can use a healthy benching from here on out, but I have heard trade rumors that he is getting shopped around right now.
Interesting. Bills wide receiver Sammy Watkins placed on injured reserve. The team has claimed Justin Hunter. Remember him?
Oh, wow.
Lions running back Dwayne Washington has a sprained foot and ankle. Zach Zenner probably going to see some more carries this week, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, next man up scenario. I liked Zenner. He just needs to get his game speed up a little bit. He did get a small bit of action last week. I watched. He seemed to kind of be a step behind. So I think it's just a game speed issue with him. But
Some rapid fire tight end news. Pat's tight end Rob Gronkowski says the hamstring's holding him back. So the player himself admitting that. We'll talk about that later. Bengals tight end Tyler Eifert injured his back in practice on Wednesday. He will not play in Week 5. Eagles tight end Zach Ertz cleared by doctors earlier this week. He will play in Week 5. Julius Thomas expected to return to game action for the Jags. Jared Cook will not play Monday night for the Packers. Neither will Lions tight end Eric Ebron. He's out as well this weekend. Those are your headlines of Fantasy Note. We're going to dive right into the matchups, Brian and I, here shortly. You're listening to the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 ESPN Radio. You are listening to the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio in Des Moines. We're also on iTunes and Stitcher and online at espndesmoines.com. Lots of ways to get a hold of us. Facebook page, 515 Fantasy Football. We're on Twitter at 515 Fantasy. I'm at Andy Hall Radio. He is at Ike FFB. That's IKEFFB. A lot of matchups to blow through here in this segment. We're going to begin with the Thursday nighter tonight, Arizona at San Francisco. On the Cardinals side, Drew Stanton is your starting quarterback. I'll give him a C+. We have to go back to September of 2014 for any historical data on Drew Stanton facing the Niners. In that game, he completed just over 50% of his attempts for 244 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not bad. Through 4 games in 2016, the Niners secondary ranks 14th, allowing 250 passing yards per game, yielding a total of 8 passing touchdowns. Stanton's stat line from 2014 mirrors the sort of expectation you could have for him on tonight's game. David Johnson, an A grade. Nobody's worse against the run than the Niners, who, by the way, just lost linebacker Navarro Bowman for the year, as you heard in headlines. Johnson is an elite-level start here. Andre Ellington is his backup, a C grade. With Chris Johnson out for at least 8 weeks, Ellington gets cleanup duty, which could be pretty significant if Arizona gets out to that big lead early. Ellington could see some time. Larry Fitzgerald, a B grade, caught 19 passes in his 2015 matchups with San Fran for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. His ceiling limited only potentially by a heavier than usual dose of the run game. John Brown, a C+, PPR play considering the number of targets he got last week and what he should see going forward, regardless of who's under center. Didn't reach the end zone in last year's games versus San Fran, but had decent yardage. Michael Floyd, a C grade, was a non-factor in both matchups versus the Niners last season. And to be frank, he's yet to make a splash this season. I see no reason why you should hurry him into your lineup. Over to the Niners side, Carlos Hyde, a C+. Because the Niners have virtually nobody else, I'm giving him a barely startable grade in a tough matchup. The Cards have underperformed through 4 games, ranking 20th against opposing backs, but should have better luck against San Fran's passing offense, which ain't scaring anybody. Jeremy Curley, I'll give a C+ to. High-volume slot guy that is flex-worthy, especially in PPR leagues. Arizona typically allows 1 receiving touchdown per game. Curley is one of the guys that could snag it. The other is Vance McDonald, who did score in the November matchup last season, bringing in 6 grabs for 71 yards in addition to that touchdown. So I'll give Vance McDonald a B grade.
Oh, isn't that cute? On to the Redskins, Ravens here. Quarterback Kirk Cousins is a B. Cousins runs into the best defense in football, which is definitely a surprise all season. I always thought they were going to give it up, but Cousins helms the number 5 passing offense. Through 4, he has 6 touchdowns, 4 picks. Not the kind of production you need to win your league, but it's also not the kind of production that's going to lose you league. Running back Matt Jones, huge week last week. Hopefully you're able to trade him away on that giant wave. I'm giving a C2 this week, coming off that major high. If you take his big game away, he has 150 through 3, so he's got this hard matchup. It's going to be pretty wicked. The Ravens are just a nasty. And we talked about Jones getting hit, always falling backwards. It's going to cost him this week. Deshaun Jackson, B-, averages 16.2 yards per catch. Has decent yardage, but he only has that 1 touchdown. So it's got to factor into what you've got. Oh, by the way, it's the Ravens' passing defense. Pierre Garçon, C, he has 0 touchdowns. This is something that surprised me, so I can't start him with confidence, especially when you have Jamison Crowder. He is the TD leader in the wide receiver group here, and I believe he's going to have the better day as everyone's focusing on Deshaun Jackson in the slot and Garçon on the outside. Someone who could benefit huge out of this week, tight end Jordan Reed, I'm giving a B+ to. He is the leading receiver on this team and is tied for touchdowns. Reed has proven why he should be your starter every week. On the Ravens side of the ball, quarterback Joe Flacco, B-. Flacco's run of the bottom-ranked defense is about over, and while we were talking he had those great matchups, he only has 4 touchdowns. And when your quarterback only has 4 touchdowns through 4 games, it's an issue for me. Flacco, B-. Running back Justin Forsett, you heard earlier, he is gone, so that moves the ball to Terrence West. B+ here. The Redskins are giving up 133 yards per game, so I expect West to have a major chunk and bulk of those carries while Kenneth Dixon kind of gets warmed up and gets his feet a little bit wet. It's not his turn yet. Mike Wallace, B. He's cooled off lately, but I'm not concerned yet. Ravens are still pass first. Brashard Perriman, who I was hoping is low, C. And Steve Smith is a B-. He is a leading receiver with 280 yards, which is a nice stunner. So if you can still snag him or make a trade for him for cheap, grab it. Pitta, B, 200 yards, but surprisingly, no touchdowns for Pitta either.
Over to New England at Cleveland, the return of Tom Brady. He gets an A grade. Clearly, he's got some catching up to do, facing a Browns defense that allows 260 passing yards per game through the first 4, a total of 10 passing touchdowns, including multiple scores in each of their games. Historically, Cleveland has been a very favorable matchup for touchdown Tom. In his past 3 head-to-heads, he's thrown for an average of 302 yards and 2 1/3 touchdowns with only 1 INT to his name. Following last week's embarrassing loss to the Bills, I would start him with confidence. LeGarrette Blount, a B-. The Browns have been decent against the run in their first 4, allowing 4.3 yards per carry, only 3 rushing touchdowns. Safe assumption that game script favors a heavy Blount workload, but make no mistake, this is about Brady's return. Everybody's watching, including Blount, who, by the way, is a little banged up. James White, a C+, will be more involved, especially in the passing game now that Brady's back. Edelman, a B+, 6 catches for 64 yards and a score in the team's last meeting in 2013. Edelman was on pace for his best season to date in 2015 before being sidelined by injury. Brady will lean on him with Gronk still operating at less than 100%, especially in the red zone. Chris Hogan will give a C+ to. He scored in his lone meeting versus the Browns in November of 2014 as a member of the Bills. Look for him to be Brady's main possession guy on Sunday afternoon. Danny Amendola, a C. You can't write him off considering he's actually still healthy and still producing when on the field. Rob Gronkowski, a tough call this week. A B- is my grade. My expectations tempered greatly by recent reports that something isn't quite right with him. Over to the Browns side, I'll try to make this quick. Cody Kessler, I'm just going to leave on the bench. Isaiah Crowell, a B grade. Fantasy's number 6 scoring running back in half PPR leagues. Crowell been the clear-cut touches leader in the Browns' backfield regardless of game flow. The Patriots are top 15 defense against the run, but they allow 4.3 yards per carry. Despite being relatively stout near the stripe, where they've only allowed a total of 2 rushing touchdowns all season. Duke Johnson, a C grade, virtually non-existent with the success Crowell has enjoyed. Terrell Pryor, a B. He proved he's capable of beating serious competition last week when he reached the end zone against a Redskins defense featuring cover stud Josh Norman, who, by the way, wasn't shadowing Pryor at the time of the touchdown. Still, when the Browns are passing, which they should be doing plenty of on Sunday, Pryor is the easy first target. Gary Barnidge, got to say it, got to leave him on the bench. Borderline droppable, it pains me to admit. He simply hasn't been utilized in the passing game in 2016. The Browns have kept him into block more often this year.
Philadelphia at Detroit. Quarterback Carson Wentz, B+ here. Look for Wentz to have his major breakout game this week because he is already having those big games, but Detroit's defense is hurt. Matthews and Sproles, these guys are going to have good games. Detroit's defensive issues. Look, you've got to consider that the defense is hurting. They're going to give up yards. They're going to give up short passing games. So I'm very confident. Jordan Matthews, he's going to have his B. His roots favor well in Detroit's matchups in the slot. He may not catch 10, but if he catches 3, they're likely going to be for a big gain. Dorial Green-Beckham, C. You can't count on this guy. It's unfortunate. I was hoping that trade was going to net some big stuff. Nelson Aguilar, B-. Zach Ertz, is he going or isn't he? Either way, be careful with this. Wentz is making those throws. He does not need to push the ball down the field that far. So they could just be waiting on Ertz to get back. So if Ertz does go, I'd start him with confidence in a B+. Quarterback Matt Stafford, he's getting a B. Stafford did have his terrible week last week, but people are allowed to do that. I expect him to be on track at home and be playing from behind in this game. So expect Stafford to get back on track. I think the biggest benefactor here is Theo Riddick. I am concerned for the ground game, but I think he's going to get his in the short passing game, as he will be playing from behind in a zone coverage. He'll get those underneath passes for a 10-yard gain. Golden Tate, C. Benched last week in the second half. We talked about that earlier. He's not running the right routes, so Golden Tate is downright benchable for me. Marvin Jones Jr., he is getting the A. Continually gets it done. He could be the reasons for Tate's motivation and little discontent. He's supposed to be the number 2, but he is showing that he is a legit number 1. Wide receiver Anquan Bolden, B-. He doesn't get those yardages, gets those TD catches, though, so he should be a suitable bye-week fill-in. And you heard Eric Ebron is out this week. So nobody is really left to catch the ball there at tight end in Detroit, I don't think.
We have a lot more matchups still to get to, but in the next segment, I'm going to bring on a very special guest. Nick Sumrall, host of the Sleeper Wire podcast and also a contributor to the most excellent fantasy app there is, the Sleeper Bot app, which Brian and I have been talking about since last year, but really started hitting this year, and letting everybody know they should definitely download this app. It's that feeling of knowing something before everybody else, Brian, that I love so much about it.
It's awesome.
No doubt. So we're going to bring on Nick Sumrall from the Sleeper Wire podcast and the Sleeper Bot app here in just a bit. Following that, more matchups, pop quiz, and more on the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM, ESPN Radio. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show, heard each and every Thursday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on 1350 a.m., ESPN Radio in Des Moines. The show also available on demand on iTunes, Stitcher, and online at espndesmoines.com. I'm Andy Hall. More matchups still to come with Brian and myself. The pop quiz as well. And if you're desperate for a dart throw at the quarterback, running back, or either of the pass-catching positions, bargain bin picks also upcoming. But now I welcome a very special guest to the show. He is the host of the Sleeper Wire podcast and a contributing member of the team that brings you the excellent Sleeper Bot app. He is Nick Sumrall. Nick, first of all, we appreciate you coming on with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Andy. I appreciate being on here with you.
A lot of ground to cover with Nick in this segment, including a bet I won between the two of us that I look forward to collecting on shortly. But first, let's start with the Sleeper Wire podcast. Give us a rundown of what you guys do there and how did you get involved?
Well, Sleeper Wire podcast, just like you guys, we report on fantasy football, giving everybody the updates on what's going on in the NFL. Not to mention, too, providing some sleepers, as the name would insist on. We like to give a lot of people, the players that appear on the waiver wire, people that some may have a lot of questions on, and there's always names coming up on the waiver wire. So that's what one of our specialties is for the show. And how it came about, we actually did come about from the SleeperBot app about a year ago now. And we just, as a group collectively, we all had certain talents and skills that brought us together to make what we do now. And take a lot of pride in what we do, and not to mention, too, that we have a dear friend of ours who did join upon this team that we like to help out a lot. His name is Rob, and I know we've told you about him, and he's a good friend of ours who deals with severe chronic Lyme disease. And, one of the things about our show that's so unique and that makes it special is that one of our biggest causes for the show is to help raise the money he needs to get the treatments he needs, because they're just so expensive, and insurances can only cover so much. So that's one of the main goals of our show, is to really raise the awareness for chronic Lyme disease and to help him out as well.
And you can get Sleeper Wire through any of the places you get your regular podcasts. That's iTunes and Stitcher and all those great places, right?
Absolutely. And you can also get us on sleeperwire.podbean.com or go to our website at sleeperwire.com.
You mentioned a couple of the members of your podcast. It's quite the cast of characters, fantasy football nerds just like us. And your co-hosts are spread out all over the country, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I myself am from New York. I mean, we have hosts in Florida. We got a host in Canada. I mean, we got them all over the place, really. And we do everything through online, which is such a beautiful thing that we can do that. I mean, a few years ago, we'd never be able to get this together. But now, with everything with technology and just the love of fantasy football and how much it's grown, it really gave us the opportunity to do what we do now.
I had the pleasure of being asked to partake a couple of weeks ago on an episode of Fantasy Jeopardy, which was a lot of fun.
Yes, and for those of you who are listening to this that may have listened to that episode, Andy couldn't grasp the concept of Fantasy Jeopardy, just like my co-host.
I nailed the first one, but then the second one came along, and I forgot we were playing Jeopardy. And, of course, you had this big, long montage leading into the segment that spelled it out for me that, hey, don't screw this up. And what did I do? Of course, I screwed it up. So,
yeah, it's all right. It's no worries. We'll still have you on the show. You're not banned from it.
Well, I appreciate that. Like I told you on the show, I was just lobbying to be a part of your montage. That's all I was doing.
There you go. You'll definitely be added now.
You're also tied to the SleeperBot app, which you mentioned a bit ago, which Brian and I are huge fans of and have been telling our listeners to download since last year. So many amazing resources assembled onto just one app.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you get everything on there. And, if for some reason, you want other opinions than just some fantasy analysts, which, I mean, hey, we do know what we're talking about. But, sometimes maybe you just need some opinions from other people. You can get it from everybody on there. I mean, it's not just limited to us analysts on there. I mean, there's all types of people from all over who can give you many opinions and that can help you out, too.
For sure. And I was just going to say in the past couple of weeks, a number of fantasy football quote-unquote experts, myself included, have been giving instant advice in the hour or two leading up to kickoff on Sunday morning, which has been an absolute blast. So I appreciate you guys allowing me to be a part of that. Now, while we have Nick here, want to allow him to contribute to what I call the down low, a handful of players, many of whom are available on your waiver wire now, and we think are sneaky good pickups to grab before everyone else thinks about them. The first of these, Nick, and I want to get your take on Dion Lewis of the Patriots. Of course, he's been sidelined by injury since last season, but reports are he's been walking around the Patriots facility and maybe going to be getting back onto the practice field here shortly.
Yeah, I loved Dion Lewis last season. I was really looking forward to getting him this season. I play mostly PPR leagues, so that's a format where you're going to want to grab this guy if he's available. He is eligible to come off the PUP list week 7. Their bye is week 9. So you're going to get him basically halfway in the season if he comes back and he's healthy and ready to get on the field. But yeah, I would definitely try to get this guy if you're having a team that's doing pretty well. Maybe you're 3-1 right now, pretty comfortable, and you got a solid team. Maybe you got a spot on your bench or maybe an IR spot you could throw Dion Lewis into. And he could be a nice flex play for you, maybe even an RB2, depending on your situation and with the buys coming up.
Yeah, less than 20% owned currently in ESPN leagues, and I've looked in some other places. And Dion Lewis is a guy people just seem to be forgetting about right now. So maybe now's the right time to grab him before everybody else thinks about it.
Oh, absolutely. I think if you're a struggling team, this may not be the type of player you're going out and looking for. A guy that we talked about on our show, actually, this past Monday, was James White. He's owned in less than 27% of leagues. Tom Brady's coming back. They loved using the scat back. There have been some reports that they want to get James White more involved in the run game. So I think he's going to be a nice pickup. If you can grab him, I think he's going to be a nice flex option, especially in PPR leagues.
Our second of the down low pickups is Kenneth Dixon of the Ravens. Nick, I am shocked. I looked. He's available in roughly 2/3 of all leagues right now. How is that possible? I
really don't know, especially if any of your fans here have listened to our show. I love Kenneth Dixon going forward. Terrence West, to me, yes, he's been playing hard. He certainly has earned that feature role for now. But long-term, you got to think Kenneth Dixon's probably going to take over. I think he's just much more of the talented back. You've seen what he did in his college gear. He had crazy numbers, breaking records. And I just think that he's more the feature type. Terrence West is just, the flavor of the week, I think, right now.
You know, one of the things I love most about Kenneth Dixon, provided he does end up with the starting job, and I don't think there's much competition there, as you just noted, especially with Justin Forsett now being released by the Ravens. But one of the things I love about Dixon, this guy's a dual threat. He could be on the field all downs. He doesn't have to hit the sideline unless he needs a blow.
Exactly, yeah. If they need to spell him for maybe a Terrence West coming out on the field, I mean, that's all they're going to really need to do. But, I wouldn't say Kenneth Dixon is you can't really start him this week or maybe even next week. In a couple of weeks, I think we'll see him start to get himself healthier, taking on the role little by little. Maybe a slow progression for him, but come midseason, I wouldn't be surprised if Kenneth Dixon is the feature back, and we're talking about him being an RB2 and a start every week.
Yeah, you and I are simpatico on that opinion. I think this week he gets on the field. He probably takes some sort of a pass-catching role is my guess, because I think Terrence West will have the early downs, at least for now. But a couple of weeks down the road, who knows? Brian Hoyer. I want to go to the quarterback position and talk about Brian Hoyer of the Bears here a little bit, Nick. Owned in only 10% of Yahoo leagues. He's thrown for over 300 yards in each of his first two starts. May have surpassed Cutler at this point. I think they're going to take their time healing that hand of his.
Yeah, well, you know what? I got to say this. I'm also a Bears homer here, so, I might be a little biased here, but I'd be happy if Cutler doesn't come back on the field. Not saying Hoyer is the answer to all of our prayers here, but what I'm saying is the reports that have even come out where John Fox didn't guarantee that Cutler would be getting his job coming back. So Hoyer looks like he should be starting for a while until proven otherwise. He's got some great matchups coming up. I mean, Indianapolis this week, they play in Jacksonville. Green Bay hasn't looked as scary as far as their defense is concerned, so I can see them putting up points there too. So they got really a lot of nice matchups coming up, and for Hoyer, I think it's going to be interesting. The one thing I do worry is I want to see what he does with Alshon Jeffrey. I didn't like the way they played this week, but maybe they just Detroit Lions just really played well against him. That's what I'm thinking here.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm a DFS guy, which I'm not, unfortunately, but if I was, I'd probably be looking at a Hoyer Royal type of stack, because I think all those vacated targets with Kevin White out for at least 8 weeks now, Eddie Royal is going to be a really nice play in daily fantasy for sure.
And even in waiver wire pickups, I think Eddie Royal will be a nice piece to own, especially as maybe like a flex option for you or a wide receiver 3 option if you're maybe you're a little in need of depth,
Yeah, no question. In season long, he's definitely a great flex play. He'll be getting a lot of targets in the coming weeks. All right, Nick. Well, thank you for taking part in the down low. One last thing before we let you go. We made this bet a couple of weeks ago through the SleeperBot app, and we generally keep in touch there. But the bet was you were taking Quincy Enunwa of the Jets. I was taking Allen Hurns of the Jacksonville Jaguars. In the end, the bigger fantasy producer, and we scored half PPR, was Allen Hurns by a whole 3 yards.
It was pretty embarrassing, I have to say. I think that we both lost this bet, but I lost by 3 yards technically. And maybe the biggest loser out of this was the fan that we told who to start between the two, recommending both. And, he didn't go wrong, at least. It's not like one scored 0 and one scored 6. I mean, it wasn't much, though. They didn't really live up to what we thought they could have done.
I do want to give you credit for coming up with the concept here of whoever the loser of this bet was has to sing on the other's show. And so here you are about to give us your rendition of the hit song from Gloria Gaynor, I Will Survive. Take it away, Nick.
First I was afraid. I was petrified. Kept thinking I could never live without you by my side. But then I spent so many nights thinking how you did me wrong, and I grew strong, and I learned how to get along until you're back from outer space. I just walked in to find you here with that sad look upon your face. I should have changed that stupid lock. I should have made you leave your key. If I had known for just 1 second you'd be back to bother me. Go on and go, walk out the door. Just turn around now, 'cause you're not welcome anymore. Weren't you the one who tried to hurt me with goodbye? Do you think I'd crumble? Did you think I'd lay down and die? Oh, no, not I. Not survive. As long as I know how to love, I know I'll stay alive.
Oh, buddy. That is so good. You are bound for stardom one way or another. No question about it, Nick. Nick Summerall, host of the Sleeper Wire podcast. You can also find their show on iTunes, Stitcher, and anywhere you can download podcasts. You also have a website you mentioned, Nick, real quick.
Yes, absolutely. You can go to sleeperwire.com, and you can also find us on Twitter at Sleeperwire Show, or find me, myself, at Sleeperwire Nick.
And if you haven't downloaded the SleeperBot app, there is something wrong with you. No question about it. Nick, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, Andy, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. This was fun.
Stick around. More matchups, pop quiz, bargain bin. What is it next? It's the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. It's heard each and every Thursday between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m., but you can get us on demand on iTunes, on Stitcher, and online at espndesmoines.com, where Brian and I put content up on a pretty regular basis. The help desk early in the week with some waiver wire pickups and our impressions on some of the hotter pickups and maybe some sleepy ones as well. Also on the espndesmoines.com website, we like to post each of the episodes, so you can listen live there as well. A lot of different options. In case you're looking for us, we're not too hard to find. Back into the matchups, we begin with the Bears at the Colts. On the Bears side of the ball, Brian Hoyer, I'll give a B+ to. His fourth time facing the Colts, first time as a starter and first as a member of the Bears. Did throw for 312 yards and 2 scores in October of last year as a member of the Texans. Indy ranks 25th against opposing passers, allowing 277 yards per game and just over 1 touchdown on average. They're also incredibly banged up, so Hoyer should have a solid start here in a pinch, and I'll talk more about why later on. Jordan Howard, a B grade. The Colts are nearly as bad at stopping the run, allowing over 105 yards per game on the ground. They've given up 5 rushing touchdowns in 4 games. Howard should be good for at least 1 here, considering the volume he's sure to see. Alshon Jeffrey, an A-. In 4 games this season, he's finished as the number 29, number 31, number 33, and number 62 fantasy wide receiver. Not impressive. If there ever was a week to get back on track and closer to the guy many drafted as a top 10 pass catcher, it's this week. He did go for 80 yards and a score in the one other head-to-head he's participated in versus the Colts. That was back in 2012. Eddie Royal, a B grade, should be very active on Sunday in a game that could turn into a shootout quickly. Love how his usage is trending, especially with the news that Kevin White's going to miss some time. More on Royal later on. Zach Miller, a B grade. Like Royal, his arrow is pointed up. Easily the biggest mismatch the Colts have seen all season at the tight end position. They've only given up 1 score to the position all year, but it was to the Lions' Eric Ebron, who poses a similar difficulty in trying to cover his combination of size and speed. So I do like Miller here. On the Colts side, Andrew Luck, a B grade. You might not realize it off the top of your head, but Chicago actually has a very good secondary. Top 10 at present, giving up an average of only 210 passing yards per game, coming off a dominating performance against Matthew Stafford and the Lions in Week 4. In 2012, Luck threw for over 300 yards against the Bears, but only 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions. There's reason to be cautious this weekend. Frank Gore, a B grade. He's scored a touchdown in 2 of his last 3 matchups against the Bears, both as a member of the 49ers. Another couple years older, but not necessarily slower. Gore should get fed plenty in a game that should be relatively competitive throughout. T.Y. Hilton, a B grade. Not in love with this matchup, but if, on average, the Bears give up 1 passing touchdown per game, Hilton is my bet to come down with it. Philip Dorsett, a C+. It's a tough draw for him. He's yet to come close to reaching the potential many of his fantasy owners were hoping for when they grabbed him off the waiver wire a couple weeks ago. Might be another week or 2 before he starts to show up. Dwayne Allen, Jack Doyle. The Bears are typically very good against opposing tight ends. I don't have a favorite between Allen and Doyle. I graded them both a C grade. Until one really separates himself from the other, neither will be endorsed by me for your starting lineup.
I agree. On to the Titans at the Dolphins. Quarterback Marcus Mariota, B-. This game here is either going to be 6-3 or 50-45. I was hoping the Titans early on in the season were going to make that leap forward in the passing game, but this year they just haven't. They have the 27th best, which is not good, obviously. And they're going to go up against a pretty soft Dolphins pass defense, so this could be Mariota's little coming out, but I don't think so. What I do think is running back DeMarco Murray is the start of the week. He's getting an A. He is having a great year. He's one of the best this year. 66 attempts and 19 catches with 5 touchdowns total. So that obviously makes Murray a huge fantasy start here, especially when the Dolphins are giving up nearly 130 yards on the ground per game. So Murray is obviously the start of the week. Wide receiver Tajay Sharp, B-. And Rashard Matthews is going to get the C+. Both are really inept here. 180 yards so far and 175 yards through 4 respectively for Sharp and Matthews here. It's just that they're not getting it. They're not pushing the ball. They're not doing what they need to, and that's mainly because of the success of DeMarco Murray. I want to ask you a question, though, Andy. Can you tell me how many combined touchdowns Tajay Sharp and Rashard Matthews have combined?
Going to say 0.
You are correct with 0. So
you know what, though? You want to know something?
What?
I just read this. This is breaking news that Andre Johnson has surpassed Rashard Matthews on the depth chart. So Andre Johnson's actually the number 3 there.
Breaking news. You have now heard it. Andre Johnson is the number 2. It's one of them like Frank Gore. Yeah, wow. You know Frank Gore's old, but then you hear Andre Johnson, you're like, wow, really? He's still playing?
That amazing Tennessee Grand Tetons team.
Oh, that's terrible. Anyways, so let's go ahead and give Andre Johnson a grade on the fly. I'll give him a B- just because he passed Rashard Matthews as a C+. Either way, it really comes down to Mariota. It just doesn't look like he's developing that big passing game, whether it's coaching or I think it has more to do with Murray's success. Delaney Walker, I think if he goes and he's at the 100% like we hope he is, I'm going to give him the B+. I think he is going to be the top receiver for the day. I look for him to snag a TD catch. Quarterback Ryan Tannehill on the Dolphins side of the ball, B+, going against an average pass defense from the Titans. I don't expect him to be the big gun this week, or any week really. I haven't been a fan of Tannehill's for a long time. So we did talk about that running game there in the headlines. It's just one of those things. If it's not Foster starting, I'm not starting anybody. Foster was limited on Wednesday, so he is still iffy. Watch for the Friday morning injury report. That'll give you your best outlook. But again, make sure you watch out for your SleeperBot app, and you'll stay up to date all the way through. So Foster would get a B if he does get the start. Jarvis Landry, he's averaging about 90 yards per game, has 31 catches. So clearly Landry is the guy to own on the Dolphins. Kenny Stills, I'm giving Stills a C+. He is boomer bust candidate, and there's no way I'm going to start him without some more confidence. He has 200 yards through 4, but only 9 catches. So that is even more disappointing. It's telling you he's either going to get 30 yards a catch or he's getting 0. He's not going to catch it all. And on the tight end side of the ball, Jordan Cameron is out, so there's no tight end here that I can put any kind of confidence starting on the Dolphins roster.
No, you're not starting Deion Sims this week, huh?
No.
You didn't mention Devontae Parker.
I didn't? You know what? No,
I think you hate Devontae Parker.
I do, because that's not the first time I've done this. I've left him off every single time I've covered the Dolphins.
And I don't know why. Honestly, when Tannehill is asked to throw a lot, he actually does pretty well. So, I mean, Parker's got to be in play here at least, doesn't he?
No.
Okay.
No. If you don't own Landry, you own nobody on the Dolphins receivers. Period.
You should own some Grand Tetons. All right, on to the next matchup. Houston at Minnesota. Start with the Texans. Brock Osweiler, I'm going to leave him on the bench. The Vikings' combination of speedy pass rushers and big physical cover corners is a nightmare matchup for any opposing quarterback, especially one like Osweiler, who isn't known as a gunslinging type. You might as well put the Vikings right up there with the Broncos as far as best defenses in the league that you should be scared of. Lamar Miller, a C+. If there's one spot the Vikings have been beaten from time to time, it's in the running game. Miller has yet to hit pay dirt, which is amazing, but he should be plenty involved both as a runner and a receiver here. So if nothing else, you get a decent yardage day out of him. Will Fuller, a C+, likely sees Terrence Newman and or Trey Waynes in coverage, which isn't a great matchup, but it beats the guy DeAndre Hopkins will see more snaps than not, and that's Xavier Rhodes, one of the most impressive up-and-coming cover corners in the game. He's huge, he's physical, rarely gets beat. I'm giving Hopkins a C grade in this matchup. And that's tough because Hopkins has already had a pretty tough season. CJ Fedorowicz, he got into the end zone last week. I'm not starting him. I'm putting him on my bench.
Settle down.
Yeah, calm down, pal. For the Vikings, Sam Bradford, a C+. Not a great matchup here, facing the league's second-ranked defense against opposing quarterbacks. The Texans are allowing a league-low 163 passing yards per game. They've only given up one touchdown through the air through 4 games. Jerick McKinnon, an A-. The Vikings will be running the ball a lot on Sunday. Houston, currently 27th against the run, over 125 rushing yards per game, a total of 5 rushing scores in 2016. Asiata will get some carries too, but as we've seen since Peterson went down, McKinnon gets the lion's share. Asiata, a C+. Get up close to the stripe, he might get a plunge for a touchdown, but that's really about it here. Stephon Diggs, a B-. Slim chance he gets to the end zone, at least in my opinion, but decent yardage game perhaps. And Kyle Rudolph's really the play here, a B+. If they get a touchdown through the air at all, Rudolph's my bet. He's been money in the bank since Bradford came in. Stick around, my friends. We're halfway through the matchups, but alas, we are going to take a bit of a siesta here shortly.
Ooh, all right.
And well, not you, Brian. You're gonna have to work harder if nothing else, because the ever popular pop quiz segment, 3 of fantasy's toughest questions, gonna be fired at Brian, unscripted, unprepared for. Brian's about to go 0-3 if you ask me.
Cake money.
I'll bet you money you don't go 3 for 3, Brian.
Oh, gee, I wonder why.
All right, stick around. The pop quiz is coming up next on the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. You are listening to the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio in Des Moines. You can also get the show on iTunes, on Stitcher, and online at espndesmoines.com. We've made it through the first half of the matchups. Time to take a little siesta from that and torture young Brian with the pop quiz.
You wish, as per the usual.
What do I wish? That I'm torturing you?
No, it's my fan mail is blocked then through the social media. It's disposed of before the world can see it. The love and support for me and my accuracy with these picks. It's terrible.
Yeah, conspiracy theories left and right. Boy,
yeah. I'm also going on George Newry here for Coast to Coast Radio.
I'm gonna say you must work for the Clinton campaign or something.
Yeah, yo.
So, 3 questions, very difficult questions I have constructed, and we will throw them at Brian without any preparation whatsoever. Brian doesn't have hardly any time to really think about these questions at all, and no matter what he answers, the deal is I will come back with the correct answer afterwards, and Brian will have been 0 for 3 at that point. So, how does that sound?
It sounds definitely incorrect.
All right, well, let's see how that goes for you. Begin with question number 1. We are 4 games into the regular season. The Titans' DeMarco Murray sits atop all running backs in fantasy scoring in half PPR leagues. Does Murray finish the season in the top 5, Brian?
At this point, I would say yes. He's been there before. He knows what it takes to be awesome. When he was in Philadelphia, we said, he's not a side-to-side runner. He's a north-to-south kind of a guy. That's what Tennessee does. That's how they use him. Tennessee is playing him to his strengths and running him into the dirt. I don't see him being there next year, and I think Tennessee is going to squeeze every last dime and every last yard they can out of him to let the rookie then come in next year.
It's almost as if I said this back in the preseason more than once, that DeMarco Murray and something big was going to happen in Tennessee. In fact, I went back and listened to the tape. That's exactly what I said. So those of you that took my advice, good for you. The answer here is, of course, yes. In fact, assuming he stays healthy, he could theoretically finish top 2 or 3 when you consider his remaining schedule. Between now and week 13, which is the final week of the regular season for a majority of fantasy leagues, the Titans are at Miami, 29th versus the run. At home versus Cleveland, they're 24th. At home versus Indy, they're 18th. At home versus Jacksonville, they're tied at 18th. At San Diego, they're 7th, but they have given up 7 running back touchdowns. That's of note. Week 10, they get a tough Packers D at home. Then they're at Indy week 11, at Chicago, number 26 in week 12, and then they are on bye in week 13. Playoff schedule, in case you were wondering, week 14, at home versus Denver, currently 22nd against the run. At Kansas City, 28th. And at Jacksonville in week 16, when many of your championship games are going on, and hopefully you'll be there. So, yes, DeMarco Murray absolutely finishes top 5, if not, in my opinion, top 2 or 3. Good job, Brian.
Golf claps all around. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Question number 2. Don't be getting cocky now. The Texans'
Wait,
speedy...
Han Solo?
I guess so. The Texans' speedy rookie Will Fuller currently ranks 7th at the wide receiver position in half PPR leagues. DeAndre Hopkins, who was taken by many in the first or early second round of their drafts, ranks 28th. Does Will Fuller finish the season ahead of Hopkins in half PPR leagues?
I'm going to say no. Knee jerk based off of the toe situation. And once defenses adjust, there's always that learning curve. How rarely does a rookie wide receiver stay on top for so long? Usually what happens is defenses learn how to jam them up, get them off their routes, and fluster them. I don't think Will Fuller is that kind of player yet, so I'm going to say DeAndre Hopkins will pass him.
The answer is no. As it sits, Fuller's 59.8 points is only 16.6 ahead of Hopkins' 43.2. So essentially, Fuller is only outscoring Hopkins by an average of just over 4 fantasy points per week through the first 4. Hopkins, at his current receptions pace, will finish with only 68, which doesn't seem plausible. He does have 33 targets through 4 games, an average of 8.25 per game, which suggests he's getting ample opportunities, just simply hasn't reeled in a Hopkins-like percentage of those and turned them into fantasy production. That will increase, and Fuller, while he has looked like the real deal, likely starts to see more attention get thrown his way in the coming weeks. You're absolutely right there.
Boom.
Number 3, Rob Gronkowski has scored a total of 1.6 fantasy points thus far this season. He currently ranks 69th at the tight end position in half PPR leagues, just ahead of Jacksonville's Sterling Neal, but just behind Green Bay's Justin Perillo. Who? All right, your level of panic, if you're a Gronk owner, is A, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Ooh, Ghostbusters.
B, oh, I do not like this, not one little bit. Or C, RELAX, relax.
I am concerned, but for varying reasons. Initially, I wasn't concerned. Through 4 weeks, had the injury, and when he was in the game, quarterback situation, was not concerned. However, the rumor mill suggests that Gronk's injury is a much larger issue than anyone in the Patriots camp is leading on. I am a little bit concerned. So, yeah, that's kind of my answer is I am dogs and cats living together, I think.
So A is your answer.
Yeah.
The answer is B.
Nah.
The issue, as I see it, is threefold. One, he's clearly being hampered by that hamstring injury he sustained back in August, and there are reports, as you mentioned, that it's actually worse than people think it is. He missed the first 2 games of the season, was severely limited in weeks 3 and 4. 2, Tom Brady has been non-existent due to his suspension. The two haven't had a chance to work together in several weeks. And 3, the Patriots' run game has been stellar in 3 of 4 games. Gronk has been used in a blocking capacity more than he's been asked to run routes. And even pass routes are called. It's no guarantee he's on the field, as Martellus Bennett is perfectly capable and healthy at the tight end spot, and the Patriots can rely on him in Gronk's absence. Bill Murray level panic if once Brady comes back, Gronk doesn't get more field time and pass catching opportunities. But my gut says we're at green eggs and ham, Dr. Seuss level panic through 4 games, and he should start to resemble the Gronk we all know and love soon. Fingers crossed. So 2 out of 3, Brian, not too bad.
Yeah, we'll see. Meatloaf is cool, but, I think it's 3 for 3.
That's what you say, but you're wrong, as usual. All right, we got one matchup to squeeze in before the end of this segment, and you do the honors, Brian.
Yeah, and we do. We're going to head over to the Jets at the Steelers. This should be an interesting matchup. Quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick, I'm giving him the B-. I would sure love him to give him a better grade because of A, Steelers' pass defense, but When you look at his stat line and you see 10 interceptions through 4 games, granted 6 came in 1 game, but still, the fact that he kept throwing them, that's not helping. He's probably cost you 20 points if he's been in your starting lineup this far. Steelers do have that 30th worst pass defense, so while I do expect him to throw his 2 or 3 touchdowns and have decent yardage, I do expect that to also come with 2 interceptions, thus negating essentially 1 touchdown depending on your scoring, 6 or 5. That negates a touchdown for me, so B- to Fitz there. Running back Matt Forte had that scare last week, but everything seems to be just fine for Forte, so get excited, but also not excited because it is a Steelers run defense, so expect his usage to be more pass catching. Wide receiver Brandon Marshall, B+. He should go out for a big night. I'm looking forward to his stat line. He has 249 through 4. Should be much higher if it weren't for Fitz's 10 interceptions, so Brandon Marshall gets the good thumbs up there. Quincy Enunwa, B-. That's right, I did say Quincy. We all know Decker's issues is covered in the headlines. So we know he can catch passes. I would like to give him a higher grade, but he's got to prove it to me. This is his chance to step up and contribute to the team and earn himself a spot. Austin Seferian-Jenkins, tight end. We don't know. Is it time yet? We don't know yet. So just roster dump him, stash him. May not be his turn yet, but when he does go, it'll be something special. Quarterback Ben Roethlisberger, obvious A here. Jets are terrible, 26th worst passing. They just can't keep up with the Steelers. I don't think so. So, you know what? Big Ben, we've seen it what they did at home last week. They're going to do it again at home this week. Going to run it up. Le'Veon Bell, he's getting a B just because it is that Jets defense. D'Angelo Williams, C+. You know, the run defense is there. It's tough. It's strong. Antonio Brown, obvious A. Doubters be darned. He came through last week. Big, 2 touchdowns. Wheaton C. Sammy Coates B. I think Sammy Coates is the guy to own here. He has much more yardage. His role is reduced a tad with Wheaton there, but don't worry. Tight end Jesse James, B-. He's a boomer bust. No real answer here. He is either going to get you 20 points or 2 points.
Bold prediction in this game, Brian. Bilal Powell will outscore Matt Forte.
Hey, you know what? It is very, very possible.
Stick around. We still have more matchups to get through, including Matt Ryan threw for 500-plus yards last week. Julio Jones had over 300 receiving yards. What do you do with your Falcons this week in a tough matchup against the Broncos? We'll tell you next on the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. You are listening to the 515 Fantasy Football Show. Thank you very much. I'm Andy Hall. That's Brian Eikenberry. This show can be heard Thursdays between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. on 1350 a.m. ESPN Radio in Des Moines, Iowa. You can also catch the show via iTunes, Stitcher, and online at espndesmoines.com. So we're halfway through the matchups. The pop quiz is also in the rear view. Still to come, bargain bin picks and the 515 Fantasy Flea Flicker. But if you've been wondering what to do with your Atlanta Falcons as they take on the Denver Broncos this week, here's how it's going to go. On the Falcons side, Matt Ryan, a C+. Denver is third in the league against opposing passers, holding them to an average of only 170 passing yards per game. They've only allowed 2 passing touchdowns through 4 games. Coming off a historic performance, one may think Ryan's a no-brainer start. Regardless of opponent, I happen to disagree. Devontae Freeman, a B grade. The Broncos' run defense isn't nearly as stout as their pass defense. They currently rank 22nd against opposing backs, and they've been burned by a few pass-catching types like Freeman in the past. If it's prudent to expect around 114 rushing yards from the Falcons as a whole, it's not asking too much to expect Freeman to gain at least 80 to 85 of those, with some pass-catching chances coming his way as well. Denver has given up 5 running back touchdowns through 4 games, so he's in play as a scorer as well. Tevin Coleman's been dealing with an illness. I'll give him a C grade here. Since Freeman's been getting a lot more work out of the Falcons' backfield, it is much less likely Coleman does a lot with a few opportunities he'll get here in a relatively tough matchup. Julio Jones, a B grade. I mean, there's no way you're benching this guy. Just don't expect anything close to the stat line he gifted you with last week. For those of you that have Julio Jones, you've been waiting your whole lives for a performance like that. That was unbelievable. Mohamed Sanu, I'm going to keep on the bench. Reports are he's playing through the pain of a separated shoulder. Not a debilitating injury, but I'm not risking him in my lineup. One hit to that shoulder, he could be done for the day. Jacob Tamme, a C grade, worth a look when the matchup is right. All Tamme has going here is that he's Matt Ryan's favorite check down receiver. And since his wide receivers likely won't find a ton of daylight, Tamme may see a slight uptake in targets in this one. Austin Hooper, I'm going to leave on the bench. No need to reach this far with a deep tight end pool, likely still available on your waiver wire. For dynasty leagues, I like Austin Hooper an awful lot. Over to the Broncos side, Trevor Siemian, your likely starting quarterback, a B+. The Falcons have one of the league's leakiest secondaries, ranking 31st against opposing quarterbacks, allowing 317 passing yards per game and the most passing touchdowns in the NFL with 13. If Siemian and the Broncos want to try to beat Atlanta through the air, they most certainly can with the talented pass catchers they've got. Plus, hey, if Derek Anderson can toss a couple touchdowns in one quarter of relief as he did in week 4, Siemian should have a day here. C.J. Anderson, a B grade. The Falcons, for as bad as they are against the pass, are actually quite good against the run. They give up a hair over 100 total yards per game to opposing backs, have only surrendered 2 running back scores thus far. That will likely change with the loss of linebacker Sean Witherspoon, who I mentioned lost for the season with a torn Achilles. I feel good about Anderson in this one. Emmanuel Sanders, an A-. He's been the clear-cut favorite target of his quarterback through the first 4 games, on pace for a 100-catch, 1,172-yard, 12-touchdown season, which would be his best by far. Expect some regression over the next several weeks, but that trend likely won't begin here in week 5. Demaryius Thomas, a B+. He's only faced the Falcons once before, back in 2012. In that game, he caught 8 passes for 78 yards and a score. It's reasonable to expect a similar stat line from him in a plus matchup such as this. Virgil Green, a C grade, should be ready for game action by Sunday afternoon, but despite this being an excellent matchup for tight ends, I'm only starting him in the most dire of circumstances. Otherwise, don't bother.
All right, on to the Bengals-Cowboys. Quarterback Andy Dalton, B+, the third best passing offense, rolls into Dallas with the 19th ranked pass defense. So Big Red is a big go. Woo! The only thing lacking from his points are touchdowns. He only has 4 touchdowns in 4 games, so hopefully the Dallas secondary is the remedy for Dalton's big game this week. Running back Giovanni Bernard, B. Gio gets a B here because his pass catching and seems to be working. He has 19 catches on 165 yards. And especially if Jeremy Hill doesn't go at all, give Gio that B+, because then he doesn't have that competition. If Jeremy Hill does go, B-. Limited on Wednesday, Bengals are averaging 80 yards per game rushing. I have zero confidence in Jeremy Hill as a start. Wide receiver A.J. Green, B+. He has 100 yards per game, 2 touchdowns. It's going to be a good and easy start, giving his capability to get open and catch in coverage. So wide receiver Tyler Boyd, the rookie, who I had huge high hopes for, he's going to get a C. Mainly due, I think, Gio is holding his own in the pass game, and LaFell is being that confident vet who is taking those targets away from Boyd. So LaFell, he's going to get his own B-. I think it's safe to say he is about the third option in the passing game behind Gio and A.J. Green. I'd be okay starting LaFell in a bye week situation where you do get tied up. He is in a good passing offense. And tight end CJ Uzoma, B-. I still can't start him even after a big game, considering he nearly tripled his production over his previous 3 games. On to the Cowboys side of the ball, Dak Prescott, B. Dak is holding his own. He's not throwing up crazy stats like he was in the preseason, but he's also not giving games away. Easily confident he's going to get you 250 and a touchdown. Someone who will get you a ton of points on your roster, running back Ezekiel Elliott, B+. Zeke's a stud. He has 400 yards, 3 touchdowns as a rookie, so expect him to stay there given the average run defense of the Bengals. Wide receiver Des Bryant, he didn't practice. He's not going to go, so don't even count on it. Don't even cross your fingers. Wide receiver Terrence Williams is going to get a B-. I've never been high on Williams. Whether it's this year, last year, he just can't get it done. He'll have a good game, then he'll have 4 down ones. And he only, right now, he has 160 yards through 4 games, so don't count on it. Someone you can count on is someone we've been talking about for 3 weeks now, who is shockingly still not owned in a ton of leagues.
Cole.
That's right. Wide receiver Cole Beasley. I'm going to give him a B. With all the options that are out there on the field, Cole Beasley is someone who consistently gets the job done. He has a ton of catches. He's a great start. And this might be the game where he breaks off for his big monster. Him and Dak Prescott just have that rapport and that came from training camp. Cole Beasley was always with the second team. Dak Prescott was doing the second team. Now they're on the first team, and they're making magic. So Cole Beasley, if you still haven't grabbed him, grab him. On finally then tight end Jason Witten, C+. Old reliable, may get an uptick here this week with Dez being out. So, if you've gotta go with Witten, go with Witten. But C+, just not seeing it out of him this year. Think old man age is catching up.
Cole Beasley, Adam Humphries, Jeremy Curley, Danny Amendola, Chris Hogan, they could all be brothers, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, that is the exact same game. All of those players. It's amazing. It's like they're like multiplying or something. Did somebody throw water on them?
I was just to say, feed them after midnight?
Yeah, exactly. Bills at the Rams on the Buffalo side. Tyrod Taylor, a C+. The Rams are giving up a decent amount of passing yards per game, 275, but they've only allowed a total of 5 passing touchdowns through 4 games. They tend to play games very close to the vest, so don't expect any exciting fireworks between these two teams. For as exciting as last week's win over New England may have been, this one figures to be a slugfest, with both teams angling for field position throughout much of the contest. LaShawn McCoy, a B+. Regardless of matchup, McCoy owners can rest easy knowing there will always be a heavy dose of their guy. The Rams rank 17th against opposing runners, giving up nearly 105 yards per game and 1 touchdown on average. McCoy is that guy. Robert Woods, a B grade. You may as well pencil him in for targets leader week to week. Woods is Taylor's best option in the passing game. LA has given up some monster games to opposing receivers. Marquise Goodwin, I'm going to leave on the bench. I haven't seen enough to warrant starting him. Same with Greg Salas and everybody else. Yeah. Except for, I guess, Charles Clay, I'll give a C+ to. He should see a decent amount of targets here following an increase in opportunities last week. He's a streamer option at best. Just thought I'd mention him. On the Rams side, this should be pretty quick. Case Keenum on the bench. The Bills have only allowed a total of 2 passing touchdowns through 4 games. Todd Gurley, an A-. Now, giving up only 3.5 yards per carry through 4 games, but they have allowed 5 rushing scores. Gurley remains a focal point of an otherwise lackluster group of skill position players. He'll get fed plenty in this game, which figures to be close throughout. Kenny Britt, I'll give a C+ to. How old is this guy? I need to know.
I don't know.
It feels like I'm going to have to check this out. Feels like he's right up there with Frank Gore, Still, in confounding fashion, he continues to eat up targets, many of them downfield. Brian Quick, a C+ as well. When your big play guy is Brian Quick, you know your team's passing game is in big trouble. My assertion is that Buffalo's front 7 will find ways to pressure Keenum into getting rid of the ball more quickly, which one would think would benefit a receiver like Tavon Austin. But I'm leaving Austin on the bench here. Unless they can figure a way to get him the ball in space, he's probably not worth even the roster spot. He's getting a decent amount of targets, but he's having trouble actually translating them into receptions and yardage. Ain't no tight end to talk about here. I ain't starting Lance Kendricks. I don't care what you tell me, Brian.
Oh, I was going to lobby for him, but I thought, you know what? You're a little grumpy right now. You're heated up through these things, so I'm just going to let it be.
It's a very salty week for yours truly.
I guess so. If you got to do the Rams coverage, I'm so glad when I don't get that matchup.
Yeah, your matchups have been way better than mine this week. I got to keep a closer eye on this anyway. We still have a couple of segments left. One more segment of matchups. We'll wrap up, of course, with our bargain bin picks. If you're in need of a dart throw at the quarterback, the running back, or a pass catcher position, Brian and I have one of each of those 3. So 6 players total that chances are available on your waiver wire right now. You can go grab them, plug them into your lineup, and expect a decent amount of fantasy production from. Give you all of that coming up here in just a bit. Brian up next is going to tell you about what could be one of the highest scoring matchups on the docket in Week 5, San Diego at Oakland. Will it be a case where you plug everybody in? We'll find out. We'll find out next on the 515 Fantasy Football Show. You're listening to 1350 AM ESPN Radio. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show, heard on 1350 AM, ESPN Radio in Des Moines, also on iTunes, on Stitcher, and online at espndesmoines.com. Real quick, invite you to like us on Facebook, 515 Fantasy Football. We're also on Twitter at 515 Fantasy. We each have our own individual accounts as well. I'm at Andy Hall Radio. He is at Ike FFB. That's IKE FFB. Feel free to rate and review our show. It's actually a really big help to us. You'd be doing us a massive favor. If I had something to give you for free, I would. Maybe someday down the road when we're all famous and stuff, we'll have some cool things to give away. That's kind of something to shoot for, right? Like, well, hey, we have an autographed jersey for, I don't know, somebody.
I will sign anybody's autograph you want me to for $5.
There you go. So Brian's doing autographs, and you can get a hold of him through the Twitter accounts. There you have it.
There you go. All right.
It could be one of the highest scoring matchups of the week, at least in my opinion. San Diego at Oakland. Brian's got that matchup.
It's going to be insane. Let's start off on the Chargers side of the ball. Quarterback Phillip Rivers. Rivers has been sneaky good. 7 touchdowns, 1 interceptions, well over 1,000 yards. And guess what? It's going to happen again, especially considering that the Raiders are the worst team defensively in all of football. They're giving up 325 yards passing. So, obviously, Rivers is a start. Running back Melvin Gordon. Same goes for the run defense on the Raiders side of the ball. They're 32nd. So it's just terrible. Gordon's likely going to have another 2-touchdown game with a huge chunk of yards. I was lucky to have him in one of my leagues. He's been paying dividends right now. Everyone was down. Gordon. He has done nothing but step up in the absence of Danny Woodhead, and he is paying huge for the Chargers. Wide receiver Travis Benjamin, B+. One of only a few wide receivers that I actually recognize by name on the Chargers offense, but it doesn't matter. They're still catching the ball. Phillips Rivers is getting it there. So by default, Travis Benjamin is going to get his targets and his catches. Wide receiver Dontrell Inman, B-. He's somebody who's probably out there available on your waiver for this bye week. So Dontrell Inman, he is averaging 13.8 yards per catch. That's good. He's in a high-powered offense. That's 2 goods. And he's playing the Raiders, which is a terrible defense. That's 3 goods. So go out and grab Inman if you need someone to start with. And on the tight end side of the ball, Hunter Henry, going to give him a C+. Gates likely not going to go, but if he does, he's going to be limited, so prepare for Henry. I don't know if he's going to do too much. He really hasn't shown he can do too much, but you know what? Keep him out there if you're in a tight end required league and you have to start somebody. Go ahead and pick up Hunter Henry. It's a high charged offense and terrible defense. On the Raiders side of the ball, quarterback Derek Carr, B+. He has a 9-to-1 ratio for touchdowns and interceptions, so he is also flying under my radar. I didn't realize. I thought he had more interceptions. Oh, by the way, the Raiders are the 9th best passing offense. So he's got that going for him. Also, what's going to help out Carr? Likely Latavius Murray's not going to go. So the running back position is Jalen Richards, C, guy who has 144 yards and a touchdown. Somebody I can't start, so I'm not even going to bother. Wide receiver Amari Cooper. I'm going to give Cooper a B+ here. He has 20 receptions, 318 yards, averaging almost 16 yards per catch. Oh, and by the way, the Chargers are down on cornerbacks all of a sudden. You heard that in the headlines, so something to watch. Cooper, B+. Probably should have given him an A, but the reason I didn't is because of Michael Crabtree, who's getting a B. Statistically, he's actually the wide receiver to own here. He has 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. So from a points perspective, Crabtree is the guy here. And then you look over on the other side of the ball, wide receiver Seth Roberts. He has terrible yards. He has like 80 or something, but he has 3 touchdowns, and he's stealing those red zone targets from Cooper. So just Derek Carr, it's just like you said, this is going to go bonkers. I really see this as being one of those 50-50 games, and they're always going to be on the red zone channel this weekend.
Yeah, final score will probably be 13-7. So
probably.
On to the New York Giants at Green Bay Packers. When the Giants have the ball, Eli Manning a B+. Green Bay has the 11th ranked pass defense, but have been lit up for some big yardage totals in recent weeks. Eli has been pretty bad actually as of late, but historically has performed very well against the Packers. He's averaged over 25 fantasy points per game over his last 5, nearly 2.5 touchdowns per game. Primetime game, his receivers are angry. due for a big breakout. Keep OBJ away from the kicking net. Big things could happen Sunday night for this Giants passing game. Orleans Darkwa, keeping him on the bench. Opposing runners are only averaging 1.8 yards per carry. The Pack are coming off a bye. That's not good. Bobby Rainey, I'll give a C grade to. Pass catching option out of the backfield. Figures to be a bit of a factor, albeit somewhat low ceiling. OBJ, a B+. This should be his first game that OBJ gives you the production that you expected out of him on draft day. Despite the perception that he's had a bad first 4 games, truth is his receptions and yardage are pretty much right on par with 2015. The touchdowns, however, are not. Victor Cruz, a B-. Very involved, should find room to run and earn his production as a possession guy that helps move the sticks. Giants figure to be throwing the ball a lot this week. He's also a red zone threat. Sterling Shepard, a C+, likely sees a lot of Clinton Dix, which is a draw. Shepard has a ton of potential, but he's far from a go-to guy. He's probably the 3rd or 4th option, come to think of it. Will Ty, a C grade. I'm taking a pass on him this week, but if you're desperate, he could be plugged in. On the Packers side, Aaron Rodgers, an A grade, averaging over 30 fantasy points per game against the Giants historically. He should be a monster. Eddie Lacy, a B-. The Giants are a top 10 run defense. Lacy has been largely unimpressive in his first 3 games this season. I'm betting on a big Rodgers game with Lacy touching the ball 15 to 20 times. At 3.2 yards per carry, that's a very mediocre day from a fantasy standpoint, unless he happens to, stumble into the end zone. It could happen. Jordy Nelson, a B+. Well, the problem with that, actually, though, he can't do the Lambeau leap. Anyway, Jordy Nelson, a B+. Look, they should put a trampoline past the end zone so that Eddie Lacy can have a chance to get
funny.
up to the. Anyway, Jordy Nelson, a B+. I love his chances against a banged-up Giants secondary that won't be able to hang with a guy of his speed and size. Randall Cobb, a B grade, hasn't lit up box scores in 2016, but easily Rodgers' number 2 target. And with opportunity comes the potential for a good fantasy day. Devontae Adams, a C grade, 2 up and down for my tastes. You could consider him in a pinch in your flex spot, but chances are probably better options on the waiver wire. Richard Rodgers, a C+. With Jared Cook unlikely to go this week, Rodgers becomes an interesting tight end 2 option with some upside, particularly once the Packers get down into the red zone.
All right, on to Monday Night. Side question here. Monday Night Football, who does the intro song to that anymore? Do you know?
No, I don't know, actually. It's a good question. Because all I can think of is Carrie Underwood. She does the Sunday Night Football song. They should have brought Faith Hill back for the Monday night thing. That's just my opinion.
Oh, lordy.
I love her.
Quarterback Jameis Winston, B-. Might be able to pull off a big game here if he can avoid the turnovers and stick to touchdowns. Matt Ryan cut it up better than a brain surgeon on the Carolinas defense, so maybe Jameis Winston will spend some extra time in the film room. Running back Charles Sims, I'm actually going to give him a B. He's officially listed as questionable, but Sims will have to go if they want to have a chance to win. Start with confidence is should be having a decent day against a surprisingly now struggling defense. You can't look at the average stats. Look at what's been happening recently. Carolina's kind of back on their heels a little bit. Wide receiver Mike Evans, I'm going to give him a B+. Going on a limb, I usually never give Evans a B+. Here's the thing. Julio obviously went bonkers for 300. Evans isn't going to do that, but if he sticks to catching instead of dropping, he should be good to go here for good old Mikey and get his owners a really good chunk of change here. Wide receiver Vincent Jackson. C. Humphreys. I'm going to give Humphreys the honorable mention here. If you're in a bind, everyone's taken. Just take a look on Humphreys. It's in a book, Reading Rainbow. Tight end Cameron Brate. Tight end Cameron Brate, B. He's a legit red zone threat, and someone, obviously me, was high on Brate at the beginning of the season. I still like Brate as a legit tight end here in the Tampa Bay offense. Quarterback Cam Newton / Derek Anderson, depending on the concussion. Either way, if Cam's going to go, great. Let's do a B+ for Cam because I think he has always had Tampa Bay's number. If not, let's give a B- to Derek Anderson. He's not going to lose you, but he should be serviceable. There's a lot better options in starting Derek Anderson. Fozzie Whitaker, B-. Average defense out of the Bucs, so expect a decent game here. Nothing gangbusters. And if Derek Anderson does go, Fozzie's probably going to have a little bit better of a game. Wide receiver Kelvin Benjamin, B-. Obviously, it's the whole Cam situation. It really all depends on him. Ted Ginn and Funches are both going to get C's. One person who will benefit, Greg Olson, B+. That's all I got to say. You know it.
Yeah, Greg is the guy you just plug in and feel good about it.
Yeah, I think
he does
so.
not miss games. He has not missed a game, I don't think, in his entire career. It's amazing.
And you got a Reading Rainbow reference.
I am so happy for that, by the way. That was one of my favorite shows growing up. And when I went to the library, I would be so sad if the book from Reading Rainbow that week was not on the shelf. Some other brat came and grabbed it from me. I'd be so mad at my mom. Like, why couldn't we get up at 6 a.m. and go to the library and get the damn book? Anyway, I'm getting all worked up. I love LeVar Burton, one of my favorite people on earth. No question about that. Stick around. We're going to wrap it up with one more segment here, the Bargain Bin Pick straight ahead, plus the 515 Fantasy Flea Flicker, all next on 515 Fantasy Football on 1350 AM, ESPN Radio. The 515 Fantasy Football Show, heard on 1350 AM, ESPN Radio in Des Moines. You can also get the show on iTunes, on Stitcher, and online at espndesmoines.com. I'm Andy Hall, Brian Eikenberry alongside. The final segment of this week's show, half of it will be the Bargain Bin picks. Of course, those are 3 players from Brian and I each, 1 quarterback, 1 running back, 1 pass catcher. Chances are you can find these players on the waiver wire now. Plug them into your lineup this week and expect a decent amount of fantasy production from. I think we've had a pretty good track record on our bargain bins thus far this year. And the second half of this final segment will, of course, be the now very popular 515 Flea Flicker segment, which Brian came up with. So a wide variety of topics we're going to cover in that. But let's begin with the bargain bins, Brian. Who's your bargain bin quarterback this week?
My quarterback is Carson Wentz. You heard about him in the matchups when I was giving him. I do like Wentz against my Lions. It breaks my heart to pick against my team, but hey, this is the business, and we look at it through good glasses. He hasn't had a bad game. Lions are decimated on defense, especially in the linebacker situation, so I do expect a lot of slot play coming out of Wentz. 40% he's owned. Go grab your bye week quarterback. He's out there on your waiver wire waiting to be picked up, people.
Do you realize that there are only 3 quarterbacks right now that have played at least 2 games and have no interceptions, and 2 of them are rookies?
Wow, that's pretty cool. Dak and Wentz.
Yeah, those are the 2 right there. My bargain bin quarterback is Brian Hoyer. An excellent stat from the great Paul Charchian here. Since taking over as the Bears' starting quarterback, Hoyer has posted back-to-back 300-yard passing games and 2 touchdowns. Jay Cutler has achieved that feat how many times in the 98 games he has played since his arrival in Chicago, Brian? Take a guess.
I will say none.
The answer is actually 1.
Oh.
He's done that once in the 98 games he has played since he came to Chicago.
That is terrible.
I'm telling you. Week 3, it was against the Cowboys, who ranked 20th against opposing quarterbacks. Week 4, it was against the Lions, who ranked 22nd. This week, he gets the Colts, ranked 25th. They're giving up an average of 277 passing yards per game and over 1 touchdown. Love his chances in a game that could be relatively high scoring. Brian, who's your running back?
My running back is a sneaky little play. He's actually a stash. Running back Kenneth Dixon. With Baltimore's backfield going the way it is, you can't start Dixon this week, but you need to stash him now. The Ravens' backfield is completely bonkers. Grab Dixon. You'll be happy in about 2 weeks.
That doesn't help anybody this week, unfortunately.
No, it's a stash play.
So what you'll do is you'll do what I suggest you do is pick up Terrence West, the starting running back in Baltimore. He's my bargain bin at the running back position. Justin Forsett's days are numbered in Baltimore. He's through. Rookie Kenneth Dixon you mentioned, but he's probably going to be eased back into the mix starting this week.
That's right.
And reports are he should be ready for game action. My guess is he usurps Buck Allen as a pass-catching option, at least at first. West should remain the lead early down guy here in Week 5 against a Redskins D that ranks 30th against opposing backs and has been torched by pretty much every lead back they've faced thus far, including the Browns' Isaiah Crowell last week. That was my bargain bin pick, by the way.
So it's good. I am being a little cheese here this week on the bargain bins, but I believe the best value is being ahead of the game.
Well, that's fine and all, but I'm looking for somebody that can help me right now. What
Well,
if
that's
I'm
why we give them two options.
okay? I was going to say we're 0-4 and we need to get out of this hole. And there's, West sitting there on the waiver wire with a juicy matchup. You're grabbing him before you're grabbing Dixon.
I would definitely agree. So we have the advanced pick and the beginner picks then.
All right, there you have it. So I got to be the beginner here. I love that. Anyway, how about your pass catcher this week?
I'm going with the same route. You need to pick up Austin Safarian-Jenkins now.
Here you go again.
I'm telling you.
Such a waste.
You need to be anticipating these things. So if you've already kind of cycled through some of your bye week stuff, and now you've got a person you can dump or that second defense you grabbed that you're just kind of holding on to, maybe you're going to stream them or something, you need to drop them and grab Austin Safarian-Jenkins now while he doesn't affect your waiver wire position. Grab and stash 2 weeks. You're going to be thanking me again.
Not at all. He is a complete waste of a roster spot, at least in my opinion. Absolute waste. But that's fine. That's Brian's pick, and we're going to see how that works out for him later on in the season. My pass catcher is Eddie Royal, piggybacking on what I expect out of Hoyer going forward. Royal is an excellent add in all formats, considering Kevin White is expected to miss some time. Alshon Jeffrey is going to get the vast majority of attention from opposing secondaries. Royals' target totals of 6, 6, 3, and 7 should rise to double digits starting this week in a plus matchup versus the Colts. I like Eddie Royal a lot.
A lot.
There's our bargain bin picks for the week. Take them for what they're worth right now. I guess they're not worth all that much. Just free advice. Free advice. Take it for what it's worth. It's free. Real quick reminder before we get into the Flea Flicker segment, which will wrap up this week's show, to like us on Facebook, 515 Fantasy Football. We're on Twitter at 515 Fantasy, constantly giving out free advice. I'm at Andy Hall Radio. He is at Ike FFB. That's IKEFFB. You reach out to us. We are not ignoring you. We will respond in kind, and we do appreciate you listening to the show very, very much.
Love you.
Thank you, Brian. The 515 Fantasy Flea Flicker is the brainchild of one Brian Eikenberry. We're going to talk about a variety of topics in rapid-fire fashion. Brian, why don't you begin, because I know you have a great idea.
Yeah, so mine is Thursday night games. We kind of talked about it off air. It's always the kind of, God, I wish I would just not start anybody from Thursday games. Actually, I'll tell you somebody who you should be starting on Thursday night games, the home team's defense. Why? Because everybody has to travel. The only team that doesn't have to travel is the home team defense. And if you look, these Thursday night games are all sloppy, and they're usually either a 3-6 matchup or they're turnover heavy. Look into it and think about possibly streaming defenses. You know, if you've got the spot, your league doesn't penalize you for roster moves, you might want to start streaming home team defenses on Thursday night games.
Boy, I don't know. I think I disagree wholeheartedly on this, Brian, and here's why. What's this Thursday night's game?
I don't even know.
I covered it earlier in the show. Arizona at San Francisco. Arizona traveling to San Fran is not cross country whatsoever. And I don't care.
Well, yeah.
I don't care who's under center for Arizona. San Francisco's a hurting unit right now. They're near or at the bottom in all defensive categories. And by the way, they just lost Navarro Bowman to a torn Achilles. So I'm not seeing starting San Fran.
Yeah, so you got to look into it a little bit. You're not going to be like, oh, well, Brian said if you do, boy. But think about it. If you have an average defense and the team coming to you is on the West Coast, that's a good matchup. You literally have 3 days to prepare. So the jet lag, the short turnaround, they play on Sunday. A lot of teams, what's happening is a lot of teams shower, leave the facility, get on a plane, and head out. They do all their traveling Sunday night into the new town. Wake up, you have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to prepare in a facility that's not yours, in rooms that aren't yours. Nothing.
All right, I'm taking this ball and I'm going to change direction. Here's what I want to talk about now. You know who Stevie Ray Vaughan was, right?
Never heard of him.
You've never heard
I'm
of
just
Stevie
kidding.
Ray
I'm
Vaughan.
kidding.
Thank you.
I knew
All
that
right.
would-
I was going to say, you are no longer my co-host. I am banishing you from this show forever. One of my favorite blues guitarists of all time died at way too young an age back in the early 90s in a plane crash, of all things. Stevie Ray Vaughan, I had this random dream of him last night, and I come to find out that the next day was his birthday.
Ooh.
Very spooky, like just a random dream about Stevie Ray Vaughan, and then I wake up the next day, look at Facebook, and realize that it was his birthday. What does that
Interesting.
mean? Is that Stevie Ray Vaughan trying to like talk to me or something?
Maybe.
From the
Did
other
you go
side?
try and like cut some riffs or something? And
I play guitar, but I'm nowhere near Stevie Ray Vaughan level.
but maybe
of,
you could have been for that one day. 'Cause he would
Maybe.
have been like channeling through you, and now it's gone.
well, that's
Too late
true.
now.
It is gone, but it was kind of a spooky / cool thing. Speaking of spooky, what's with all the damn clowns? Can we talk about the clowns for 1 minute?
Yeah, 1 minute.
All
I
right,
swear
there was
to
this
God.
video. There was this video out there of these guys that were like running or jogging or something. There was this clown with a knife or something, and they were taking a video of him, and he came after them. And I'm like, you know what? All it's going to take is one concealed carry person, and
You're
that
dead.
clown is going to be absolutely, positively, 100% dead. What are these people thinking?
And
They're
you know
not.
what? I will
Mental
be 100%,
illness.
Yeah, I will be 100% justified and exonerated of all charges when I put two in a clown's chest for chasing me with a knife. You're
Yeah,
done.
I don't know, man. The whole thing just bugs me. So I want to get that off my chest. I wish I had more time, but we've run out of it, unfortunately.
We didn't plan this. Clowns are
No,
bad.
no, clowns are bad. Just get away from me forever. And don't ever, ever, ever come back, or I will put a slug in you. There you go. So thank you, Brian, for another wonderful week. Good luck in all of your matchups in week number 5. And you are listening to the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio.